Section 2.4, we are going to learn the quadratic formula. Bet you can't wait. Quadratic formula. This is one of those major things that every high school student should know. And it's not too hard. It's easy to use, but what we're going to do is we're going to go through the hard part first and show you how to develop the quadratic formula. I think this is important. I could just sit here and show you what it is, how to do it, and then boom, we're done. But that wouldn't be that fun, right? I want to make this a little more fun and develop this quadratic formula. If you remember from the completing the square stuff, we're going to actually solve for x. Here's the general form for a quadratic equation. All right, this is the quadratic equation right here. What we're going to do is we are going to solve for x. Okay, this thing right here. So maybe this will bring back some memories. We actually started this the other day. The last time we had class, we actually started this, and we didn't quite get all the way through, but I kind of gave you a hint on what to do. All right, so here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to solve for x. So we got an x here and an x here. Well, we're going to do this by completing the square. So first thing we do is we take this constant, chuck it on the other side. Actually, let's do this. Let's do this first. Let's get rid of the coefficient in front of the x squared. Remember when you had like 3x squared plus 2x plus 5 equals 0? What did we do first? First thing we did is divide everything by 3, didn't we? Remember that? Okay, it's coming back to you now. All right. So what are we going to do here? We're not going to divide by 3. What are we going to divide by? Divide by a. That's right. So let's do some different color. So we're going to divide everything by a. All right. So once we do that, what's going to happen? Well, the a's cancel. So what do I have? X squared plus. Yeah, I'm going to write it like this though. I'm going to write it b over a. I'm going to write it as a coefficient. All right. It's the same thing, isn't it? Because bx over a. And then plus c over a equals what? 0. All right. Let's just think ahead a step here so we don't have to write down every little thing. I need to get rid of this c over a. If it's a plus c over a, how do I get rid of it? I subtract it. So I subtract it and I'll get a minus c over a. Well, why don't I have anything else over here? Well, because 0 over a is just 0, right? So 0 minus c over a is just negative c over a. And I left a blank here. Remember that? So we have to complete the square. We have to complete this blank. Fill in the blank, basically, is what this is. Remember, it's always going to be plus. Now, how did we figure out what goes inside of that blank? Right, we take half of this, and then we square it. That's right. So you take the middle coefficient, which in this case is b over a. We take half of it first, and then we square it. So let's do this off to the side. So b over a, take half of it, or multiply it by 1/2, and then do what to it? Square it. Okay, so what do we get? We get b over what? 2a, and that thing is squared. Everybody see that? b times 1, a times 2 is 2a. Then we square it. What do we get when we square it? b squared over what? 2 squared is 4, then a squared. So that's what goes right here. So I put a plus b squared over 4a squared. Well, you can't just do that to one side. If I add this to the left side, what? Got to add it to the right side. So put plus b squared over 4a squared over on the right side. See? Did it to the same side. Make sense? Just a basic algebra principle. So far, so good? Now, look what we did. We completed the square. When I say we completed the square, we made this into a perfect square. Okay? We completed it. We filled in the blank to make this thing into a perfect square. That's why they call that solution or that method completing the square. It's a perfect square, which means what's a perfect square look like? Looks like that. Right? So how do we figure out what goes in here? Well, look at this. What's going to go here? X. Right, because if I take x and I square it, I get x squared, right? What's my sign going to be? Positive. Where do you look? You always look there, because this is always going to be positive. Because when we square something, it's always going to come out positive, whether we started off with a negative or not, right? Make sense? All right, so that's going to be a positive. That's always from this sign right here. Now, how do we figure out what goes here? either take half of this or square root of this, right? We did this before. So what's going to be here? What's the square root of b squared? B over, what's the square root of this? 2a, right? Or, like I said, you could just take half of this b over a, right? So b over a times 1/2 is b over 2a, right? See that? Equals. Alright, this part right here is a part that a lot of people have a little bit of trouble with. But let's see if we can figure this out. Let's do this in a different color. Let's slide this over just a tad. I want to find a common denominator. Well, I've got a and I've got 4a squared. What would my common denominator be? It'd be 4a squared. That's right. So look, what did you do to a to get to 4a squared? You had to multiply it by what? A 4 and an a, right? So what am I going to have to do up here? Multiply that by 4 and an a. So what do you get? Negative what? 4ac. Good. What do I have to do to this to get to this? Nothing. So what's this going to be? Plus b squared. You with me? So it's just a matter of finding common denominator. All right, that's not too hard, is it? Let's go back. All right, so now what we're going to do, let's go back to this yellow. We're going to write it, so my denominator is 4a squared. Let's just switch this around a little bit. I don't like this negative 4ac plus b squared. Let's write it like this. Let's write the b squared first minus the 4ac. Is that all right? I just switched order. It doesn't make any difference. It just looks a lot nicer like this. I like that minus to be in between them. All right? We're getting there. Getting really close. We did this earlier in this whole section 2-4 thing. Or this whole chapter 2, whatever it was. First of all, I want to solve for x. That's what I'm trying to do, isn't it? Right? Solve for x. So I have to get rid of the squared. How do I get rid of a squared? Square root. Okay, so watch. X plus b over 2a equals. That means I got to take the square root of this. Do you remember what goes in front of that square root, though? The plus or minus. Good. So you didn't forget everything, did you? So you got a plus or minus, and we got to take the square root of all this stuff. B squared minus 4ac. I can't take the square root of that. There's no rule. Now listen, a lot of people say, oh, the square root of b squared is just b. Minus, oh, the square root of 4 is 2ac. You can't do that. Not when you have a minus in between these. Right? If it was all being multiplied, yeah, you could. But if there's a minus or a plus in between them, you can't really do anything with that. You can't separate this into a square root and this into a square root with a minus or a plus. You can only do that if it's being multiplied. Did you hear that? All right, make sure you understand that. So really, the only thing I can do then is this. But you can separate the top and the bottom because this is division. All right, so I took the square root of the top, which is this, over the square root of the bottom. Let's just do that in our head. It's not 2a squared, it's 2a, because you got to take the square root of a squared. Square root of a squared is a, square root of 4 is 2, so that's just a 2a. Right, the square root cancels out that squared, right. Yep. One more step and we're basically done. I got to get rid of this plus b over 2a. How do I do that? Subtract. Right, it's being added, right? It's being added, so I subtract to get rid of it. So x equals, if I subtract it, I get a negative b over 2a on the other side, right? And then you got all this mess. So let's just rewrite this again. And that's over 2a. But to make it look a little prettier, they both have the same denominator, don't they? So instead of writing them as two separate things with two separate denominators, let's put it all over one denominator. So what do we have on top then? Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac. And that whole thing is over what? 2a. And there it is. We just came up with it, didn't we? By completing the square. You recognize that, don't you? Did you do that in Algebra 2? Sure you did. Alright, so you probably use that a lot. You may not, I don't know, you may have, depends on who taught you and whether they wanted to go through the trouble of doing this. But they may not have shown you how you got to it, but I like doing this, okay? I think it's really important to show you how you got to that formula. It's something that you don't have to do every single time, and we did it once. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time, right? So we did it once. We came up with this formula right here, and that is our quadratic formula. It's different than the quadratic equation. The equation, whoopsie daisy. The equation is this, okay? It's not really a formula. You're not really plugging stuff in to find, what x is. The formula is getting x by itself. You get it? There we go. All right, so now, who cares? Why did we go through all that? You're thinking, well, I could have just completed the square to find, to solve for x every single time. But there are times where the formula works out really nicely. So let me find. Here's a good one. Yeah, go through all that. Okay, here we go. So what we're going to do is they're going to say to solve. This is how you actually use this. Now, do you have to go through this on a test or a quiz? No. You should have this memorized, right? In fact, I'll write it on here. Memorize. Okay, memorize this formula. It's not that hard. Write it down a whole bunch of times, and then you'll memorize it. Don't just sit there and stare at it and try to remember it. Write it down. The more you write it down, the more you're going to remember it, okay? So here's how we use it. It says solve this. It says x squared minus 4x plus 2 equals 0. Now, this is our quadratic equation. This is that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, all right? But we've already solved for x, haven't we? We've actually already done all the work to get x by itself. So here's our formula. What do? We just plug stuff in. Well, I like to do this. I like to write down what our a is, what our b is, and what our c is. Just over here off to the side. A, b, c. So what's our a in this formula right there? Remember, this is ax squared plus bx plus c. So what's our a? It's a 1. That's right. There's a 1 right there, isn't there? All right. Now, if you had a problem with a 3, then a would be a 3. But if there's no number there, it's going to be a 1. So a is 1. What's our b? Remember, our equation is ax squared plus bx. So it's negative 4. So b is negative 4. Okay. What's our c? Plus 2, positive 2. You got it? So really, all this is just plugging and chugging. If you know the formula, and that's what formulas are good for, plug and chug, right? Take a number and put it in. And that's what we're going to do right here. So let's do it. So let's write down our formula. X equals negative b. Okay, I'm just going to do it right here. What I would do, if you really wanted to learn the formula for every single one of these problems I give you on the worksheet, I would rewrite this formula every single time. Why? You don't need to, but it helps you memorize it. Okay? You could just have this one formula sticking on the top and just refer to that formula every single time, but you're not going to memorize it that way. Right? If you write it out every single time, right? Cover it up, right? And then try to remember it and write it down. If you do that, I think I gave you like 8 problems on this worksheet. If you do that every single time, you'll have this thing memorized. Right? Just a suggestion. I don't know if you'll do it or not, but if I were you, I would do that if I didn't have this thing memorized. All right. So here, let's do it like I would do it if I were you. I would go x equals negative b plus or minus square root, and I'm trying to do this without looking. All right, so I'll do that. Okay. So negative b plus or minus square root. Do you remember what it is? B squared minus 4ac, and the whole thing is over 2a. That's what I would do if I were you. All right. I would do it every single time, just so you remember it. All right. By the 8th time, don't you think you'll have it remembered or memorized? Yeah, I think so. So let's plug some stuff in. So x equals negative b, the opposite of b. Well, b is negative 4, so the opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. Got it? Plus or minus square root b squared. Let's do that in our head. Negative 4 squared is what? 16. It's not negative 16, is it? Because it's negative 4 times negative 4. Negative times negative is positive 16. Minus 4. Watch what I do. I always do this. That's for the a, and that's for the c. So what is the a? It's 1. What is the c? It's 2. And that whole thing is over 2 times a, or 2 times 1. You with me? So we just plugged. Now we what? Now we chug, right? We just work it out, okay? That's what we do. So x equals 4 plus square root. Let's just simplify this stuff in here. Let's do it a little bit at a time. 16 minus what? 8? Yeah, over what? 2 equals 4 plus or minus square root. What's 16 minus 8? 8 over 2. Let's simplify this. We can take, I'll tell you what, let's do this off to the side. Square root of 8 is the same as 4 times 2, isn't it? What's the square root of 4? 2 what? Square root of 2. Everybody see that? It's important that you do that because you won't be able to simplify this all the way unless you do that. So what do we have? We got 4 plus or minus what? 2 square root of 2, and that whole thing is over 2. Now look, it's not just the 4 that's being divided by 2, it's also this, right? So 2 has to go into 4 and it has to go into 2 square root of 2. Does it make sense? If you wanted to, you don't have to do this, but look, if you wanted to, you could write it like this. Isn't that the same thing? Sometimes it makes more sense if you see it like this. So what's this? What's 4 over 2? Just plain old 2. Plus or minus, what's this going to be? What happens to this 2 and this 2? They cancel out, right? So what are you left with? Square root of 2. That's your answer right there. It's actually 2 answers, isn't it? Looks like one answer, but it's really 2. What is it? It's 2 plus square root of 2, and then it's 2 minus the square root of 2. So both of those answers will work for this. So what's x equal to? 2 plus or minus square root of 2. So I could put 2 plus square root of 2 in for x here and here. Do all that multiplication, it'll come out to 0. Or I could put 2 minus square root of 2. Put that in for x, put it in for x here, and then work it out, and that whole thing will come out to 0. There you go. So that's how you use the quadratic formula. What do you think? It's pretty nice, isn't it? All right. Yeah, a lot of people like to plug and chug. In fact, a lot of people, they learn completing the square before this because if you didn't know how to complete the square, you wouldn't be able to develop the formula. But they learn completing the square before this, and then they just, after they learn this formula, a lot of people just forget about completing the square. Hopefully you're not going to do that. But a lot of people like this so much, they just use this every single time. It even works for something that factors real nice. This doesn't factor nice and pretty, does it? Because 2 times 1 is 2. There's no way I could get a 4 out of that when I add them together. So that doesn't work. But it still works, even if your numbers come out to nice, pretty whole numbers. All right? Let's see if they give you another example. Yep, they give you one more. And then we'll stop, I believe. Maybe I'll do one more after that, okay? I think we got some time. Let's go pink on this one. We got 2x squared equals x minus 4. Well, this doesn't look like the quadratic equation, doesn't it? It doesn't look like a squared or ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. I don't even see a 0 in here. But what are we going to have to do? Yeah, you could do that, but I'm not going to do that because I like this to be a positive. I'd much rather the first one be a positive. It just makes it a little... Now, you could. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I just think it's easier if you keep that positive. So let's do this. Let's take the x, move it over, and take the negative 4 and move that over. And then set it equal to 0. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah. Now, you could do it the way you said it, and that'd be fine, but I just think it'd be easier if we keep this positive. So it's 2x squared, what? Minus x, what? Plus 4, good. Equals 0. And now we're good to go. You could do this by completing the square, but this particular lesson is on quadratic formula, so let's definitely use the quadratic formula. All right, let's write it down. Remember I said write it down every single time? Even if you think you got it memorized, I would write it down every time. Negative b plus or minus. Well, yeah, did you say that already? B squared over 2a. All right, good. So we're good to go. All right. So now let's do this. I also like to write down what my a, my b, and my c are equal to. It's just kind of nice. You don't have to. You could just look up here and figure out what it is. But I think it's kind of easy to just list them down. So what's my a? It's 2. What's the b? Negative 1. Good. What's the c? 4. Good. All right. So let's go back to this color. And let's use the formula. So x equals negative b. Well, it's the opposite of negative 1, right, which is positive 1. Good. Plus or minus square root. B squared is 1 minus 4 times a times c. A is 2, c is 4, over 2 times a, which is 2. Now we just simplify this. We did the plug, right? So we plug and chug. So we put everything in, and now we just work the thing out and simplify it. So let's do what's inside the square root first. I don't know. Can we do this in our head? 4 times 4 is 16 times 2 is 32. What's 1 minus 32? Negative 31. We got a negative inside a square root. So this is a little bit... Oh, it can happen. Sure. It can happen, but it makes it an I. Exactly. Alright. But now that we know how to work with imaginary numbers, we can figure what to do here. Okay? And look what we get. We got 1 plus or minus. Now what's this going to be? It's not going to be the square root of negative 31. It's going to be what? Square root of 31i. Or if you could put the I in front if you want to. A lot of times they put the I in front. Over what? 4. And you could just leave it just like that if you wanted to.
You don't have to separate it?
You don't have to. I think I'm looking at the book, and they do separate them. I'm not going to require you to do that. They actually put the I out in front. This is exactly how the book writes it. I mean, I don't know. Part of me says, yeah, I should make you separate it because you got a real part and an imaginary part there. But I would be fine with this. If you write your answer like that, I'd be perfectly fine. Either way. All right. See, they put the I out in front just to make sure that it's not under the square root, because some people, that square root thing could kind of, float around here. The I is not under the square root, it's outside it. Either way, it's perfectly fine. It's not too hard, is it? Quadratic formula is kind of nice, isn't it? Kind of makes things a little bit easier for us, I think. We could have done that by completing the square, but we did it by quadratic formula. Let's do one more. Yeah, we got time. What's up with that? Cubed. It's a 0. Why would I put a D there? Come on, I've always been sticking. Come on. What do you think? It's got a cubed. Can't do quadratic formula with a cube, can we? How can you break it down? What's it look like? Something that we've done before. You've been quizzed on this. It's a sum of...
I know what it is.
That's it. It's a sum of 2 cubes. Right, it's a sum of 2 cubes. You remember that? Apparently not. Watch. Actually, sorry about that. Oops. Okay, watch. It's this. I'll write it right here. We learn a method for this. Remember same opposite positive? Oh, wow, yeah. Okay. It wasn't that long ago. Watch. Same opposite positive, right? So look, what goes here and here? A and B go here, right? What goes on the ends here? A squared and a B squared. What goes in the middle? AB. Right? Memorize that, you can do this. Do you agree? So this is kind of like off to the side. So let's do this. We're gonna write. Actually, let's do it. Let's write it like this. This is x cubed plus. What's being cubed to give you 8? It's 2. This is 2 cubed. So if we look at this, what goes in place of the a? What goes in place of the b? The 2. So every time you see an a, you put an x. Every time you see a b, you put a 2. That's all there is to it. All right. So watch. Put the 2 parentheses here and here like this. Let's put the signs in there. Same, opposite, positive. Let's put the numbers in. So what goes here? X and 2. What goes here? X squared and 2 squared, which is 4. And what goes in here? The 2x, right? So 2x. And what's that all equal to? 0. Now look. Here's something we learned before. When you have 2 parentheses multiplied together and your answer is 0, what do we do to both of those parentheses? Set them equal to 0. That's good. So watch, x plus 2 is equal to 0, and what else? Right. Okay. And now, look, I can solve for x here. What's x going to be right here? -2. So that's one answer. It's not all the answers. You actually get one answer here. How many answers are you going to get for this on a quadratic? You're going to get 2. So how many answers are you going to get altogether? 3. Why? Because it's x what? Cubed. Okay, there's 3 answers. See that? Yeah, let's use a quadratic formula. Might as well. Okay, that's what we're learning today, so we might as well use it. Let's write it down again. X equals -b plus or minus. This should be ingrained in your head right now, shouldn't it? 4ac over what? 2a. All right. Let's plug some stuff in. Let's find out what our a, b, and c are equal to first. What's our a here? 1. What's our b? What's our c? Good. All right, so let's put some stuff in here. So x equals -b, the opposite of b, is +2, right? Now it seems like every example we've done today, the b has always been negative. That's not always going to be the case. All right, you understand that. If b was actually +2, what would we put right here? Put -2. That makes sense, right? Okay, plus or minus square root b squared. So it's just a 4, isn't it? Minus 4 times a times c. A is 1, c is 4, over 2a. Or 2 times 1, right? Which is just 2. You with me? So now we just keep working on that. Plus or minus, square root. What's this going to be? 4 times 4 is 16. 4 minus 16 is -12 over 2. Right? Looks familiar, right? Looks very close to what we did earlier. So it's 2 plus or minus square root of 12 what? I. And that's over 2. Let's take 12 off to the side, square root of 12, and figure out what that is. Yeah, I'm going to use 3 and 4, or 4 and 3. Okay, square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 3 is just the square root of 3. So the square root of 12 is 2 square root of 3, isn't it? And I need to do that because, look, 2 will divide into it, won't it? All right, so don't leave it square root of 12. That'll be wrong. I'll say simplify, and that'll be wrong. I want you to simplify it all the way you can go. So let's see what we got. Let's put them over. Let's go 2 over 2 plus or minus what? 2 square root of 3 over what? 2, and then an I out here. Okay? What happens? 2 over 2? It's a 1. Good. What happens here? 2's cancel, so what do you get? Square root of 3, I, oh, forgot the plus or minus, okay, and then there it is. So you actually get 3 answers. You get those two. Those are 2 answers, right? Because it's 1 plus square root of 3i, and it's 1 minus square root of 3i. And you also have this right here is -2. So you actually get, you need to circle both of them. And I'll tell you what, just put them right next to each other. So there you go. So those are your answers for that problem. Aren't you glad you remembered how to do the sum of 2 cubes? Like, yeah, sure, I remembered it. Well, you remember it now, though, don't you? It comes back to you, doesn't it? Yeah. So you're gonna have to remember that stuff. Sometimes you're gonna have to go back and you're gonna have to learn some things that you might have not learned when you're supposed to learn them. Okay, it's gonna come back. Almost was gonna say comes back to haunt you, but hopefully it's not haunting you. Hopefully it comes back to help you, not haunt you. Okay, so there we go. It makes sense? Yeah, I think so. All right, so that's the kind of stuff you're going to be doing. You're going to be doing all these problems by using the quadratic formula. So even if it factors, even if you look at it and say, "Oh, I can just factor it and get an answer." No, don't do it that way. I want you to complete this. I want you to use the quadratic formula. Okay, no completing the square, right, on these particular problems. Why? Because it's a whole lesson on quadratic formula, and I want you to learn it. That's why we're doing it. Okay. So will you promise me that every problem you'll write down the quadratic formula just like I did up here? You need to do that every single time because that way you'll remember it and then you won't forget it when it comes to a test or a quiz. You got it? Okay. All right. So worksheet, and that's it.